Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just
speaking into the void?
But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Welcome to No Question About That. I'm Ed, today with Adam, and we're talking about the new Old Trafford. Welcome, Adam. How's it going?
Good, mate. I don't know whether we call it Sir Jim's vanity project, Sir Jim's legacy project. I'm not sure what we're going to go with yet. The reactions are predictably mixed.
Well, they called it New Trafford in all the press material. I think they probably wouldn't want something like that to stick because they're going to want naming rights at some point. We'll come on to that with the financing piece. Almost 100% they will end up with naming rights. Why wouldn't you? It's going to be the biggest deal in the history of sports anywhere on the planet. But yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the style and concept and the launch, which was trailed by Sir Jim in his media blitz on Sunday, Monday. We'll talk about design, initial reactions to that, some of the history or lack of it, fan group reactions, because it's been kind of interesting there, government regulations, planning, timelines, role of the owners, the very distinct lack of the Glazer family here, and financing options. So we'll try and run through that in a daily sized length pod, something like that. What were your initial reactions? Because on my timeline, it dropped very late at night, almost in the middle of the night. And because of that, I did not get to sleep for about 3 hours in the middle of the night while I was furiously tweeting like half the planet.
I was very surprised to get a message from you at 9 p.m. my time. I won't lie. So that's like middle of the night for you. It was about what I expected in terms of the response. You just knew that any design, whether modern or just different, was just going to catch people off guard. And that's okay. Like there's so much history attached to so much feeling and emotion that significant amount of change is going to rub people the wrong way. It actually really reminded me, I was thinking about it. It reminds me of Bilbao's stadium, I can't pronounce it, the San
Mamés.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. My Australian accent can't get that out. It reminded me of that, which I think is a beautiful stadium. So if you take it out, if you just judge solely the new stadium design, I really liked it. I understand the need for the tent, although it does configure to the whole circus argument in the club, what the club is at the moment. So they've got 5 years, if you believe Sir Jim, to make themselves worthy of playing in that stadium. Otherwise, it'll be fitting of a circus tent.
Yeah.
I really like the Trident design. I think the red glow is going to be really cool. They've definitely borrowed from the Allianz Arena on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we understand what the new stadium is for financially. The upshoot of that, Real Madrid are now posting £200 million revenues with their stadium redevelopment. So I'm not sure what you think and what your initial reaction was, but I'm more optimistic, though I understand the negativity.
Yeah. I mean, zero lack of surprise because it was effectively trailed the day before that we're going to get this dropped. And then months ago in terms of this being leaning towards a new stadium rather than a redevelopment, I think that was fairly clear from what had been said by Sir Jim before and the task force and Populous and a whole bunch of others that are involved with the club and this project in some fashion. So no surprise they've gone for this. No surprise, in fact, nearly a year ago when I talked with Andy Green last, Anders Red, the finance guy, and we were having a bit of a back and forth about that. I was like, the economics of a new stadium make more sense than redevelopment of an old one. I'm pretty certain of that. It doesn't mean that there won't be a strong visceral reaction to Old Trafford, and that there will no doubt be a lot of dust in the air for Old Trafford's last ever game, and I will fight, murder, sell my grandmother, parents and children to get to that one, I will be doing it through fair means, quite possibly foul. And so will millions of other United fans, of course. So absolutely with you, no surprise whatsoever on this kind of strong reactions, both to this being announced just as a concept that United would be moving on from Old Trafford, but also the design and the images and stuff like that. There's nothing they could have done if they'd come up with the most bland possible design. I think people would have erred on the side of that's a horrible corporate bowl. As it is, it's very striking for good or bad, and there have definitely been reactions on both sides of that one. It's very, very striking. Sir Jim called it iconic about 400 times, I think, in his media rounds. He's very keen for us to understand that this will be iconic. And I mean, it will be. It'll be the tallest structure in Manchester, presuming no other towers are built in the intervening years. Apparently, it will be visible from Liverpool.
My favourite part, yeah.
On a clear day, if you squint really hard, you'll be able to see the 30 odd miles.
Just knowing is enough for me how much that would upset them.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. We'll just raise the flags right now. And of course, as you said, United got 5 years. I'm going to guess more. Just large infrastructure projects like this, I'd be really surprised. I mean, they made an argument that they're going to build it in a modular style. So Norman Foster, in his video, which, funny enough, the club actually didn't push out initially. They did later.
Which they should have.
Yeah, because it was actually, he's the architect. That was interesting.
It was much better a push of the vision, right? Like like for me, like and obviously I'm not, you might understand this better. If I'm a local fan, I want to understand the vision for the community and the whole redevelopment, which is what that video did. Like in the thread I sort of posted, I was saying I don't understand why they haven't included that, because it just speaks to the whole vision better.
It does. And then on the inside, I mean, obviously it's a regeneration project, and hopefully they've been very clear, and this will kill off a lot of media nonsense around the government financing this, because they are most certainly not going to do this. This will be private capital that does that. It will likely be private capital that build all those apartment blocks as well. I mean, 100% it'll be private capital that builds all the apartment blocks. Government financing will be for things like new roads, new railway, moving of a station, because it's owned by the railway network, which is partially nationalised. Moving the freight terminal, they need government support for that, which will move to Liverpool, ironically, so they get to look at a freight terminal and Old Trafford, New Trafford, whatever we're going to call it.
I feel like they've been clear, right, that the infrastructure is what they're seeking government funding for.
Yes. Yeah, very, very clear, but I'm sure there'll be a bunch of trolls that misunderstand that deliberately as well.
I don't even think it's deliberate.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I think you learn with these online discussions that people don't understand the arguments.
That's true.
Or they're just the strict breakdown of what infrastructure actually is.
Well,
infrastructure is not buildings.
Yeah. So we got the outside design, the trident, the sort of net tent-like thing covering it. And the reason why they've gone for a big tent-like structure is they want a lot of event public space. They want people we'll come to the financing piece, but they want people to spend a lot of time in this area rather than in pubs around, which will be an interesting discussion for later down the line about the impact that has on local businesses. But a lot of new stadiums do this. They want people to spend as much time there as possible. They're also going to be, I'm sure, hosting loads and loads of events that are non-football. Spurs are doing 30 per year. I imagine this will be a lot more.
It's got to be part and parcel. It's just part and parcel. What it is.
Yeah. It's an event space.
It's an events arena.
Yeah. And I understand also why a lot of football fans will feel a bit icky about that, right? It's not solely for us. It's for, as the 1958 put out, Taylor Swift concerts and NFL and other sports stuff and just other general entertainment and exhibitions and all of that kind of stuff. But again, you mentioned Real Madrid and Bernabeu and Camp Nou, Barcelona, both going to be doing this. It's the whole point about some of their design. It's to maximize the space, not for 25 days a year, but for as close to 300 odd as you possibly can.
Well, I guess we can point out the difference for the detractors is that the Bernabeu and Camp Nou are specifically different in that they were stadium redevelopments. I think the difference, obviously, that the other side of the argument is the stadium is so dilapidated from 20 years of mismanagement and lack of care that let's be honest, redevelopment wasn't really an option. You can go to 87,000 by redeveloping one of the stands, but you're just it's half the money for so much less.
If you look what Barcelona and both Barcelona and Real Madrid did, they've closed their stadiums and they did a complete strip down. I mean, especially with Camp Nou, they stripped it all out completely. It's basically rebuilding the stadium from scratch, and it's cost them 1.65 billion euros to do that redevelopment, plus 2 years away from Camp Nou. Real Madrid got really lucky in that 2 years or 6 months plus summertime. So let's call it 9 months or so of their redevelopment was lockdown football.
They would use some luck as well.
Yeah. All right, so that's the launch and the reaction. So Jim and Barada and go ahead. Yeah,
I'm curious, from a more local perspective, how do you perceive the entirety of the project? What do you think the only thing that can happen now from submitting the planning to the Trafford Council is local resident objection? I'm curious, from a more homegrown perspective, how do you perceive that project?
Well, I mean, I don't live in that area, so I mean, let's just make that caveat.
More of a lived experience, though, right, than mine, which is the furthest point away from the stadium you can get.
The interesting thing will be if there is, are there objections and what does that look like? I mean, the planning regulations in the UK are famously kind of difficult for doing these large scale infrastructure projects. That said, like South Manchester is one of the areas that was already designated by Labour, the government in the UK, as a development project, a priority development project. This is a government that's trying to focus on growth because the UK economy is in the shitter for various reasons, macroeconomic, global issues, war, fuel prices and Brexit. And so the government and clearly Manchester Council are both extremely favourable to these kind of projects. And we've seen similar sized projects across the UK have a very outsized economic impact. The Olympic Park and development, for example, after the 2012 London Games, which is completely different. I mean, just like night and day transformation. Some people were not like that. I mean, it's brought gentrification, it's brought different people, and that will change the nature of the area for sure. And this is a massive project. It's a huge space. It's one of the largest covered spaces in the whole of Europe, and a massive swathe of land, not just the little piece of land that United already owned, but a surrounding area as well. Of course, the other side of the Quays already had that kind of redevelopment project, along with the Lowry Museum and Media City and the mall shopping centre that's there and the Imperial War Museum and stuff like that. So this side of the Quays, the south side, is kind of ready for redevelopment. And with that will come some winners and some losers, and likely it spikes house prices. It will create new jobs. A lot of those will be temporary. We're going to have, time will tell on exactly how this is financed, but some part of this will almost certainly be a rebalancing of what is corporate executive seating and what is normal seating. And quite possibly general ticket prices will go up too. I mean, almost certainly, I would say. It's certainly been true at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And so that is for ill. That said, they could do everyone a real solid here, 100,000 seats. They could make sure a good proportion of that, given that 55% is on the third tier in the planning, a good proportion of those 100,000 seats are affordable for everybody. And Sir Jim could get a massive PR win here, given that 15,000 seats are going to be executive seats in the initial planning. They can go through the roof on those prices. They can have their cheese bar and their padded seats and their vibrating chair and the big fucking dildo or whatever you're going to get on that seat. But do the local fans, which he keeps saying we should look after, do them a solid and make sure it's reasonably priced that everyone can go. There you go. I'll get off my soapbox, but I think that'd be...
That's why I asked.
Be right. Yeah. One of the, while we're talking about sort of local fans and fan culture, one of the interesting, fairly notable absences from these design concepts, and they are concepts, and we should say that the final stadium could look very different. If you look at the initial drawings for Wembley, for example, doesn't look anything like what it turned out to be. But absent was the Trinity statue, the Fergie statue, the Matt Busby statue, the Munich plaque, any nods towards history. I'm quite sure they will get integrated, but it felt like a really striking oversight and an easy one to not miss out.
Yeah, the lack of history for a club that has such a proud one was really jarring.
Yeah.
You and I spoke about this before we started, but to not have the statues included in the design, I understand these were made by conceptual artists, but surely in the back and forth, you'd be like, let's include these. I don't need to see an event. Yeah. I don't need to see an event stage in the terrace. You could probably just plug in in the Trinity or something like that there. Sir Alex Ferguson, take your pick. Yeah, the other part for me was, will you incorporate old elements of Old Trafford in? So what about the tunnel? Just things like that. I liked in the conceptual design that the players walked out from the corner. That was a nice little touch. I thought the
benches
video
looked similar as well.
I did laugh at like the football manager style players at a level of graphic detail on that. But I really liked, although we've gone past the initial reaction, I really liked that video of them walking out and how that looked. How the fans in the level 3 were right above the players. That was really cool. You got to say, like, all things aside, it is a really exciting prospect now. You and I, neither of us believe that 5 years is realistic. I think they said as late as the end of the 2032 season is possible instead of 2030-31. I think we're edging much more closer to that based on all the obstacles. Still, I mean, they've done a lot of political posturing. They had the vision displayed at the Labour and Conservative conferences, so they've been doing the legwork in the background for a while now.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot to be done.
They are manifesting this because they haven't secured financing or anything like that. All along they're manifesting a lot. Title by 2028 feels fanciful. This by 2030 definitely feels fanciful. It would take very strong government to push it through, basically. Maybe even an act of parliament. I mean, they couldn't get Crossrail done. It took 35 years to do that. It's the railway line that runs from east to west in London. They've not been able to do a third runway at Heathrow, even though that's been talked about since the 1980s. So, yeah, infrastructure projects are notoriously difficult in England, and this may well fall into that category. But, of course, there are plenty of new stadiums in England. This is just, like, more ambitious than any of them by an order of magnitude. All right, so since we were on to government regulation, planning, timelines, it's like Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, fully behind this, has been from the beginning. He's an Everton fan, so he may be looking at this and comparing it to Bramley Dock. And this is obviously on a whole other scale to what Everton have done, which looks very interesting. Like striking from the outside, Bramley Dock, kind of boring inside, but fine.
What I found interesting by their build is they probably took 4 years from when they broke ground, and that is such a smaller scale. So I think that's probably something more to bench off. That, to me, looks like a 6 to 7 year sort of initiative. I know that Jim pointed out the canal offers different opportunities instead of the modular build.
32 pieces of Meccano as
it can't reduce it by that much. I'm sorry to say, like it's not gonna halve it.
There was a bridge built in East London. It was part of one of the. It was partly a legacy of the 2012 Olympics, where they did all these new railway lines, and they built this massive bridge, 500-ton bridge, in a modular fashion, and then rolled it in and plonked it into place. And so, no bridge, locked in place in an afternoon. So certainly some buildings are being built like this. But yeah, I mean, even the Qataris who could murder 4,000 people in building the stadia for the Qatar World Cup took more than 5 years to build all those projects. So yeah, it feels extremely ambitious. But then again, that seems to be Sir Jim's style at the moment. He's just going to say that it's going to happen and try and make it happen.
I said to a group chat last night, it's probably the last title we'll see at Old Trafford, and we'll move into the new stadium, potentially in 2032, fresh off a 20-year title drought, which is it's a dreadful thought.
Wow. And then, of course, we'll have to pay for the new stadium, so we'll be broke for the next 20 years. No, we're going to get onto the finances and why I think it's very different to, say, the Arsenal, the Emirates Stadium, which did bleed them dry for quite a while, and they may be regretting their lack of ambition there. What did you make of the fact that the Glazers were completely absent, not a peep from them at all?
Call me sunny side up, and I copped a toweling in my mentions for saying it, but I thought it was noticeable that they weren't involved at all. Never that they were going to be, because to me, and you and I have spoken about this on, I think, the Mailbag episode, but I've always pictured the stadium and the redevelopment as Sir Jim's legacy project and how he sees his overall contribution to the club, whether it's Ineos, and I think it can be sealed by like Ineos Presents, whatever the new stadium is called. So whether you go with a new Trafford, and I know that offends people, but that's a good way to show that you're invested and you're putting money in, because you can do a deal that's very long. Like you said, the biggest we've ever seen. I thought that was noticeable that they weren't involved. It was Sir Jim front and center and Barada, the new CEO. That them being trotted out to me was noticeable. If you're trying to tell me that the Glazers are going to hang around because of the value that this offers, we already know that the value of the club has swelled to the point that they're going to be able to max out cash-wise anyway. So don't tell me they're going to hang around for the build for however longer. I just don't buy it. With the window opening up, what they'll get is a very reasonable, more than reasonable deal. They'll get an overpay for the club in the share prices. So to me, this is the beginning of the end. Call me a cynic. Call me an optimist. Tell me I'm manifesting it. I believe that we're in the window now. And yeah, as quoting the MCU, we're in the end game. So I believe this is the last year of Glazer ownership. I think we're in the last 12 months at the very least, even though it'll take time. That window opens in August, and I think I think you could signal this as the beginning of the end. Whether you want to call it from the protests and Sir Jim's media availability, since to me he is now the face of the club as the owner, and you want to try and tell me that the minority owner fronting up isn't the sign of something bigger and that they're not invested. It's just nonsense. I think we're defeating those narratives very easily at this point. What did you think?
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I think part of the reason why he's front and center, I mean, partly there's a chain of ownership happening. I always suspected, although it's not locked in, of course, they can decide not to sell, and they do vote as a block, the Glazers. So Ratcliffe is the largest single own shareholder in the club, but the Glazers together can outvote him, of course. But the fact they've not been involved with this, he is front and center of all the developments at Old Trafford. The way the sales document was worded, it's giving off smoke signals that this change of ownership is happening. No crystal ball here. I can't promise it. I couldn't tell you exactly what's going to happen with the refinancing of those two senior secured notes, the bonds that come to maturity by 2027 exactly. But all of that, plus the stadium and the requirement for some level of owner financing in this, suggests to me they're not involved. If they thought that they could just go borrow money off the market to finance a £2 billion stadium and that would pay for itself, would they not have done that already? They have found every single way possible to ensure that they got more value and more money. So I don't think they're hanging around for the next 20 years. I wanted to talk about the fan group reaction. That was what was in the 1958 press release, said they'll be hanging around for another 20 years. And this looked like what did they call it? Corporate bowl or corporate?
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more with that. I
found it very odd.
A lot of admiration. I understand that there's more questions than answers at this point. We're talking about financing, what happens to the debt, being that the only other two clubs with comparative debt, which are Everton and Tottenham, they have stadiums. So that's the difference. But to me, I don't think it lines up. This looks like anything but a corporate bowl to me. So
I found it I spoke at length on the last pod, admiration for everything they've done for bringing fans to a single cause and creating a single voice. And it's been incredibly challenging over 20 years to do that because all fans have different opinions and no one opinion is more important than any other one. And it's been hard to sustain. Like there were moments around 2005, obviously, and then on, and then especially around 2010 with the bond issue when it was kind of clear just the scale of the debt that United were taking on over the long. It was out in the public domain, and a little bit around 2012 and the IPO and so on and so on. And then recently with the post-COVID upweighting in debt and the poor performances on the pitch, right? But it's just been really hard to sustain, and they've done a great job of that. And then it gave a very weird vibe to drop a press release out and shit on the project. Now, you might like the design, you might not like the design. Fair enough, that's everyone's opinion. They're kind of now a group that represents lots of fan opinion, like not just the inner circle, or are they just the inner circle? Because there wasn't a consultation like period. They didn't like gather fan opinions and then go, yeah, we've, like say Must would do, and there's a lot of criticism of Must and how effective they are in generating change, right? But Must would go survey 20,000 fans and come back and go, 15,000 fans say they hate this design and 5,000 say they love it, or whatever it is, right? And that wasn't the case. So it just struck me as a little bit odd, bad timing. Maybe they feel like it was a fantastic protest, and it really was.
It was.
Thousands and thousands of United fans peacefully but vociferously protested before a really big game, the biggest for several months, perhaps the most impactful since people broke into the stadium and got the Liverpool game called off. And this kind of, in a sense, stole their thunder. I don't know whether that was playing into it. I'm speculating, but it was just a little bit, the vibe was a bit odd. The funny thing was, I read that and I was like, God, that's classic old men shouting at clouds. And then the Manchester United Youth Supporters Association put out a press release that was almost exactly the same. I was like, oh, well, it's also young people shouting at clouds as well.
Yeah, that was a really strange one, and they really copped it for that. I just sort of felt like, again, I feel like we have to condition everything, otherwise you're labelled as supporting the ownership. It's more that I think the fans sort of stand against the anti-corporatization and
and I get it.
The anti-capitalist view, and I understand that, but that you've got to find like some middle ground and understand like change is going to happen. How can you have your voices heard as part of the change? And so you can hurt yourself by being too strongly opposed to the issue as opposed to discussing some sort of middle ground, which is, like you said, getting the ticket scaling for the new stadium so that it is protecting locals and not pricing them out when you have so many. Like, it's really cool that the Stretford end is going to have, I think it's like 37,000 seats.
Yeah.
As a result of the size of the stadium. And I don't know, there has to be some discussion for middle ground. But then, like, how do you have consultation when fan groups can't come together? It's a very complex thing.
It is.
I'm hesitant to say too much on it.
There are suggestions that possibly ground could be broken this year, and that'll be interesting. And I think it would be sensible for the ownership, Sir Jim and his team, to do some consultation and to make sure that they understand through this process, before any ground is broken, before financing is put in place, the things that are important. Now the decision has been made to move forward with a new stadium. What are the things that are really important to us? Right. And that doesn't mean some kind of like collaborative design committee. So we get some kind of Frankenstein, Homer Simpson car style thing. Right. Where do we want Sir Alex Ferguson statue? We want the Trinity statue. What do we want in a museum? What do we want in terms of like entertainment and services? What do we think about the balance of pricing between the cheap seats and the expensive seats? What role do we want like famous faces at United and hit names from the past to be involved in planning some of that? Like, these are things that matter. Fan experience, what should that be like? Like, how do we generate the best atmosphere possible? All of that.
Yeah, I think you and I discussed this previously, but the fan engagement is the worst part of their ownership so far. Yeah. So if we reflect on the last 12 months, the lack of fan engagement and consultation. So how can you work with, I don't know, fan advisory board to discuss the heritage aspect of Old Trafford and what you want to preserve, where the best place for the statues would be in a new stadium build? Like, once you have a better idea of, and you've moved to the actual planning and you have detailed plans of what's going to be built, and, consult and make them feel like their voices are heard. Obviously, you're not going to be able to please them on everything, but you've got to be able to you like Sir Jim, his biggest weakness is that he comes off as someone who cannot understand the fan experience. Like how he was speaking, what a true supporter is, was definitely the most jarring part of that interview for me. To try and label people based on what games they attend and things like that. It just spoke as like, I don't know, like a dad speaking at the dinner table about something he cannot understand.
Let's ask for his opinion on Drake.
The Drake Kendrick feud.
He just wouldn't compute,
insight.
I'm sure. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about financing, because this is one of the ones that is extremely emotive, and debt is a very dirty word for very understandable.
Loaded term when it comes to United.
Now, my view as I was going to say finance person, but I guess maybe I'm an ex-finance person now, but my view are they're very different.
A person of a finance background.
Giving off finance vibes. Yeah. So I think we should just be really clear that there are different types of debt. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. You rack up a massive credit card bill because you've been out boozing like every night for a year and you can't afford to pay it off. Bad debt. It's really going to hurt you. You buy a new house and the house price appreciates. Good debt. Or you invest in a new factory. Good debt, right? So I think the debt that's loaded on the club from the leverage buyout is some of the most toxic possible, and it's had a 20-year impact on the club. So, by the way, is the revolving credit facility in which we've used to buy players, specifically for Eric Ten Hag. Really, really poisonous. Like, we can quote a fee of transfer marked or whatever, but you need to add quite a bit to it because we're paying massive amounts of interest. This, I just don't see as bad debt at all. And I know it's going to be really, like, maybe we should use a different word, like financing. Because if you look at Real Madrid, Barcelona and Spurs, you've got three cases there who've massively increased their revenues associated with that financing, and they've got an asset that'll last 100 years. As a result, I find it very hard to equate that to leverage buyout debt and say this is the same thing. But of course, many people are going to see it like that.
I feel like the difference, if we can dumb it down for people, is like getting a stadium is like getting a home loan, a good interest rate.
Yeah.
Whereas like the revolving credit facility is living on a credit card when you can't afford it. Just lobbing everything on your credit card, or going on a holiday with a high interest loan when you don't have the cash. It's just like someone making classic mistake in their teens and early 20s when they just spend the rest of their 20s paying off their debt. In this case, it's spending 20 years paying off the debt that's actually getting bigger.
Yeah.
So it's just living beyond your means. That's what the revolving credit facility reminds me of.
Now, there is a question about exactly what is made up. Like Spurs is a long-term bond, basically a 30-year bond at a very, very low ticker interest rate. And they got a very good deal because they financed at the right time. They broke ground in 2016. It was finalized in 2019. They had quite a few delays, but it came in before the pandemic and before a spike in interest rates that came along with the global inflation there.
One of the differences here.
It will be interesting. Now, there's very little risk. I've seen a lot of people, even like well-known journalists who should know better, honestly, or maybe they do know better and they'd rather not.
I think it's Sir Jim skepticism. I think that's the way I interpret it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. They're like, how can United borrow when they've already got $1 billion? Well, it's secured on different assets.
Yeah, it's completely different.
There will have to be some owner financing. I do not believe that United will go. They'll get a bunch of banks together, a syndicate or one bank or whoever it is, or it's partial private equity money. It seems less likely that, or individuals could be. I think it's unlikely that, hey, will you Saudi Arabia stump up £1 billion for naming rights and 10% of the club?
No, I don't think they'll need to. I've always the thing I've always thought with the stadium, it'll be a mix of equity and debt. And I know that we've already labelled that debt is a bad term, but it'll be different because it's what it's saddled against or not saddled against. I think banks will be lining up. The only difference being that pre-COVID interest rates of those types of loans were around half of what they are now. So they're in the twos. Now you're probably looking at 4.5%.
But this is why,
that's hard to compute.
Yeah. United will have to do two things, I think, or Ratcliffe will have to do two things. By the time they get around to financing this, and they will have to pay down some of that high interest. They did, by the way, last financial year, paid it down, but then they've got quite a lot of outstanding payments on some of these transfers. They'll probably have to get some of that £400 million in 391 million or whatever it was in transfer payments down to remove some of that overall debt burden. Because it's not just that what type of debt it is, it's like, what can you do with your free cash flow, right? So that they'll probably get some of that down to get a reasonable interest rate. And Sir Jim will probably have to stick £500 million in or something like that, right? I mean, he paid himself £500 million. I
was going to say, so just chuck your dividend on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Ineos are in an interesting position right now. They even came out to the market and said that Europe was restructuring their carbon economy, and it was kind of difficult. I'm not quite sure I'd have guided like that, but that was their company. They know it best and all of that. So there will have to be some element of that. That can really only come if there's a full change of ownership, as can refinancing the senior secured notes, the major bond. And if they want to get reasonable interest rates, probably have to pay some of that down too. It's a difficult juggling act, even for someone as rich as Sir Jim, because one, he doesn't risk his own money. It's just the nature of, he doesn't want to risk it.
It's how rich people get rich.
Yeah. At low interest rates, it's fine. Like a 3% interest rate, which is what Real Madrid are paying on Bernabeu. Like, it's basically inflation rate. It's basically free money. Yeah, it's not a problem. At 7, 8, 9%, it's very, very different. And you go from paying £60 million a year in interest to £100 million, and that's quite a difference. Even if this generates another £300 or £400 million a year, right? Which it likely will do, right? This Bernabeu, 250 million euros this year, 300 million next. Barcelona are already guiding something similar. This will generate a hell of a lot of extra revenue for good and for ill, because some of it we're not going to like.
That's the way I think you have to look at it. Like, United already have the most revenue from match day in the Premier League, which was 137 million last season. This will send it well beyond 200 million. Well beyond. We will be streaks ahead of other clubs. And unfortunately, the increasing importance of finance in football, that matters. And it will allow the club greater flexibility. What did you think of sort of the, I guess, more Omar Barada's comments, the non-committal? I understand there's limitations around the PLC, and he pointed that out. What did you think of Omar Barada's comments around everything? And even him and Sir Jim both saying in 3 years, United become the most profitable club. I'd really be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Was that more just sales points?
Yeah, I actually think he could have sold it better, because I don't think you being a PLC stops you like selling the proposition to bank. I mean, they can do a roadshow, right? There will literally be a prospectus and a roadshow in which they'll go around to the major world banks and they'll tell everyone what a fantastic project it is.
Who will be lining up to give them money.
Exactly. Absolutely. JP Morgan, Goldman, Bank of America, HSBC, they will all be giving Sir Jim the reach around, wanting to be part of this, no doubt, right? Sorry, that was rather crude metaphor there. Now you've got that in your head. Yeah,
it's the reality of it. We're already talking about the high tridents and what they can represent pre-recording. So at least you didn't say that on the air.
Indeed. All right. Look, it's exciting. It's scary. There's a major amount of change. It's sad because Old Trafford and the 130 years of history are going to disappear. Barada said it's very unlikely they'll keep any of it. They won't. There's zero chance they'll keep any of that. That's real estate.
He did hint at that.
Yeah.
He said that the build does change that, and it's like eventually the stadium will be knocked down once they move into the new one. It's just
and it wasn't. They were already hinting at it months ago, saying it was not very viable to like deconstruct Old Trafford to create a smaller stadium. Maybe they'll build elements in which, again, he suggested, which will make a smaller crowd capacity viable in this massive stadium. The other thing, of course, is you make the women's team really good and you sell the fuck out of that proposition and you make people feel excited about going to see the women's team, and you get 100,000 people turning up at Old Trafford to see the women's team like they do at Barcelona, and all of a sudden you got a massive revenue stream, an even bigger one, and you're using that stadium. That's an even better proposition. Fill the fucking thing as often as possible, and then many of those problems are solved.
Yeah, it's like you said in the last episode we did, they're not utilising the revenue streams available to them, and that is going to be one of them. Now, he hinted at potentially not using the third level and how that wouldn't affect the women's games. Well, you shouldn't be thinking like that. If you're buying into your ambition, you're thinking bigger and looking at what other clubs do and trying to monopolise it for yourself. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, I thought it was noticeable, as well as the Glazers not being there, that they had a statement from Sir Alex Ferguson. I was wondering what your point of view on that, and wondering if that might be perceived negatively at all or only positively.
He's a good company employee, isn't he, Ferguson? He backed the Glazers.
Well, he's not an employee anymore, is he?
He's not an employee. They officially speaking,
They shelved him.
He's a good non-paid ambassador in the looser sense of that. Yes, I mean he backed the Glazers for years, so I'm not quite sure why he would turn on Jim's grand vision at this point. So yes, I mean if they're going to trot him out, as I understand it, he's old, right? I don't think he's going to be doing an awful lot of public appearances around this. But
Statements will do.
Yeah, statements will do.
I just thought it was notable.
Yeah,
to have that included. You need those sorts of things for sort of your average fan who's not looking into the complexities too much. You need that buy-in.
We'll cover this again in the months ahead. If they break ground this year, I will be absolutely amazed. But hey, maybe so. That'll be the first step towards New Old Trafford, the Ineos Park Bowl, or whatever god-awful name Swanson.
Yes, the corporatized Ineos Bowl presents New Trafford.
Yeah, something like that. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, listeners, viewers, wherever you are. Catch you on the next one.